All right, good morning, guys. Guys should just finish up a do now question. In your own words, describe and explain any memory that you have from elementary school. Provide as much detail as possible. So this one's a little bit different. Once again, it's kind of continuing our units or our lessons on memory. And so this one was kind of broad, very out there. I expect everybody to kind of have different answers, different responses. But once again, going back to this idea that, if I ask a lot of you guys, what did you have for breakfast 3 days ago? Maybe it might be difficult for some of you. But I guarantee, you could all probably at least give me one memory from elementary school at all, whether it be, I used to play football at recess, so I had this really awesome teacher. I had, me and my best friend did this, whatever it may be. You can sit there and just give me all these details about it, but, you don't remember something that happened a couple days ago. So once again, just kind of giving you that mindset and understanding when it comes to memory. So whatever you guys have, just make sure it's about 45 sentences. Make sure you get it jotted down. So today, continuing our discussions on memory, we're going to discuss about a couple different types of memory. So we're going to go through them. There's about 3 of them. And so kind of breaking down the detail for you, and hopefully by the end of this you'll have a better understanding. So first type of memory we're going to discuss is something called sensory memory. Sensory memory holds information briefly, but can allow individuals to retain impressions of sensory information after the original stimulus has ceased. So there's a little bit to unpack there. So let's go back to the beginning. It holds information briefly. So, and chances are, because we start off with this one, this is probably the most brief of the 3 that we're going to discuss, meaning that chances are you're not going to remember this. So when I talk about sensory memory, we talk about senses, okay, things a flash of light, something I touch, taste, see. If I do it over and over again, the chances are, hey, if I touch this table right here enough times, I'm going to remember kind of what it feels like. Is it smooth? Is it soft? Whatever it may be. But this is like, okay, if I'm walking around the mall and somebody accidentally just brushes up next to me, kind of brushes my arm. It's like, oh, that quick split second, oh, I remember that. I kind of, understood what it felt like. But then as soon as it's over, as soon as, brushing's done, then memory's gone. It's like, okay, information comes and it goes just like that. So it really just has to do with that, initial sense, that initial sensation, then it goes away. So, holds information briefly, but can allow individuals to retain impressions of sensory information after the original stimulus has ceased. So, if you think, take it, go back to talking about sensory. I think I used this example a few lessons ago. If I go touch a hot stove, it's a quick second. It's really brief, and I only remember that information, that exact sensation of what that feels like while it's going on, kind of like the mall example. But if it's, I can retain that impression, I can retain stuff about that over time if it's powerful enough. And so, chances are I remember, oh, don't touch that again, because it was powerful enough to store it up there going, hey, that's bad, that's hurtful, it's hot, whatever impression you want to get. And it can store it, long after, hey, the burning sensation's over. So it has the chance to be stored, more long-term. Thankfully it does, for most of our sakes, but at the same time, it can be over and done just as quickly, and, if it's not something that extreme. So, next up, we have something called short-term memory. Short-term memory is a limited capacity memory system, whereas information is usually retained for only about 30 seconds without long-term retention strategies. So, this is like, just casual conversation. If you're talking with somebody, okay, you'll remember some details here and there, but chances are, unless you do something that, you're writing something down, you're taking active steps saying, hey, I want to remember exactly what's going on. Unless you do something to help that encoding and help that happen, then chances are it's going to be there and gone in about 30 seconds. So if I say, hey, remember this number, 38542. 38542. I say it twice, and then I'll go off and talk about something else, yada, yada, yada. And then I go on to this next, by the time I probably get to the end of the next term, chances are you maybe remember 1 or 2 of the letters, or try 1 or 2 of the numbers, but unless you did something to really remember it, you're not going to remember it correctly. So that's what I'm talking about. So before we move on, what I'm talking about, we're going to talk about strategies. Think of something like your phone number. Chances are, today they're all stored in the phone. You don't have to really remember them too much anymore. But chances are, at least maybe your phone number, maybe 1 or 2 others. Like if you just have them memorized by now because you've used them enough. But this tends to be why phone numbers and other sets of numbers are only about 7 letters. There's this kind of general rule when it comes to memory that the human brain remembers things in maybe chunks of 7. So they say chunks of 7 plus or minus 2. So no greater than 2, no less than 2. But we can remember things if they're in these small amounts. So if I'm saying, hey, remember these words, remember these numbers, usually it's going to be between 5 and 9, but no greater than, obviously, because then it becomes much more difficult to remember. So that's part of the reason why you're able to remember your 7-digit phone number, or an additional your area code. But it doesn't really go beyond that, because if you tried to remember that, it would just be much more difficult. Just kind of the way our brains are wired, just kind of the way we work. But yes, there are some exceptions to this. This is not a rule for everybody, but the general consensus is, chunks of 7. So, actually, go ahead and pause there for just a second. Something I want to discuss before we go into our last term. This gets brought up, I think I've actually brought it up in previous classes that you guys have had, maybe I haven't. Go back to this idea of memory when it comes to first-hand accounts. When I say first-hand accounts, if you think like, say, eyewitness testimony, say a crime is committed, something bad happens, then they go around and talk to people that were there. You say, hey, what happened? How many people were there? What happened? Yada yada yada. And you could have like 10, 12 different people standing right next to each other, watching the same thing happen. But when I go ask each individual person, chances are the story is going to be varied a little bit. Yeah, the major details are going to be the same. Yeah, this happened, this happened, this happened. So it's like, okay, we can figure out that nobody's lying. But when it comes to more specific details, like, okay, what was the person wearing? How tall were they? Were they tall? Were they short? What kind of hair? More specific things. This is where it starts getting more difficult. And they actually found that eyewitness testimony is actually one of the most unreliable pieces of evidence to use when it comes to court cases and convicting somebody. Because believe it or not, even if something is very shocking, it's very intense, you think you remember everything. It's those details that start to fade after a while. So do me a favor. There's a YouTube clip mixed in the middle of these. Go ahead and press pause on this video right now and watch that. It's a few minutes long. It'll kind of give you a better idea of what I'm talking about. All right, so hopefully that kind of gave you a better idea of short-term memory and kind of issue, like I said, some of the issues with first-hand accounts and eyewitnesses. Last term we're going to discuss is long-term memory. Long-term memory, a relatively permanent type of memory, and I say relatively because, over time, as we get older, more and more information getting stored, us becoming a little bit older, sometimes, even though we remember for years, maybe we tend to forget things. So a relatively permanent type of memory that stores huge, very technical term there, huge amounts of information for a long period of time. So this goes back to my do now question I asked you guys. Hey, tell me about a memory you have from elementary school. The whole reason you still have that and you're able to tell me all those details, your best friend's name, how disgusting the pizza was at lunchtime, whatever it may be, because it was stored in long-term memory. Whether you chose to remember it or chances are, hey, it just kind of got stuck there. Because it was either very important, you did the same thing every day, whatever the case may be. So, you got stored in long-term memory, and the chances are now it's never going to leave you, no matter what. So, that's going to be it for today when it comes to the notes. I think hopefully you guys have a pretty good understanding of what these mean. Last thing we're going to do. It's kind of an experiment. It's a little more difficult to do over the video sessions, but we're going to try it anyways. We're going to try to store a long-term memory in your guys' brains like right now, today. So, I want you to write one thing down. One thing down that from today's lesson, like something I said, something you're wearing, is it nice outside? Just something about today. One thing about today, one sentence that you want to try to remember when finals week comes around. Then I'm going to ask you that same question. Hey, do you remember back when I asked you to remember that question? When I asked you to remember that sentence you wrote, what was it? So we're going to see whatever technique you want to use, just apart from like writing yourself a sticky note next to your phone or whatever it may be, apart from that, some way that you think you can remember that come finals week. So write it down. Got any questions, shoot me a comment in the section below, shoot me an email, and talk to you guys next time.